I am trapped, both financially and emotionally, in my own family, where my brother and sister create messes and I'm the one who has to clean them up. Instead of being thanked, my parents see it as my obligation, and last Christmas they kept a secret from me. They used my money to buy a vacation apartment for my brother, and they celebrated Christmas there, without inviting me. I know I need to act. This isn't a story about money. It's a story about dignity, and the price of endlessly carrying the burdens of those who never truly considered me part of the family. Before I continue with my story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button right now. I was born and raised in a small town called Concord, New Hampshire, where Christmas always meant snow blanketing the rooftops. My family was once the envy of the neighborhood, the picture of a model household. My mother, Sadie, a librarian with a passion for order and old books. My father, James, a civil engineer, practical and stern. My older brother, Ethan, 2 years ahead of me, was the creative one, an artist at heart but erratic, always rushing to finish a big project. My younger sister, Sophie, 2 years my junior, was always brimming with entrepreneurial ideas, though she never saw any of them through. Our family had traditions that felt sacred: weekend barbecues, lakeside camping trips every summer, and an annual family photo in front of the Christmas tree. But from a young age, I understood that within that photo, each of us had a fixed role. Ethan was the dreamer, Sophie the conqueror, and I, Olivia, the one in the middle, patching up the cracks in the family no one else seemed to notice. When Ethan graffitied the neighbor's mailbox in the name of visual art, it was I who painted it over. When Sophie took payment for mowing the lawn but never did it, I was the one out there with scissors, trimming grass under the afternoon sun to salvage her honor. As we grew up, I didn't choose art or business. I studied finance, became a wealth management professional, responsible for handling millions of dollars for exacting clients. Meanwhile, Ethan kept failing at gallery shows no one attended. Sophie opened a mobile cafe that shut down in 2 months and is now selling products online, hoping this time it'll take off. My parents always made excuses for them. Ethan needs space to create, or Sophie is discovering her true passion. But to me, they said, "You're the stable one. The family needs you." And so, I lent Ethan $42,000 for an exhibition. I gave Sophie $65,000 for 5 different ventures, none of which lasted more than 4 months. When my parents exhausted their savings helping the two of them, I was the one silently transferring money so they wouldn't need a bank loan. Ironically, I could build airtight financial plans for clients down to the last cent, yet couldn't protect myself from being used by my own family. Every time they promised to pay me back, I believed them. Not out of naivety, but because I still believed that if I tried long enough, gave enough, stayed patient enough, they would be grateful. They would change. They would finally see my worth. But instead, all I ever received was yet another broken promise and another bitter silence. I met Daniel at a financial seminar in early October, when the streets of downtown Boston were still glowing with early autumn light. I hadn't even planned to attend. But after a client canceled last minute, I dropped by, just to kill time between meetings. Daniel was the keynote speaker, a young expert in personal finance, dubbed the untangler of money knots in relationships. I wasn't expecting much until he began his talk. Not with flashy slides or dry graphs, but with real-life stories about successful women trapped in financial roles within their families, about brothers, sisters, even parents who borrowed money and promised to repay, but never did. And when it came time for questions, I, unexpectedly, raised my hand. If you lend money to a family member, they promise to pay you back but don't, how should you deal with it? I didn't name anyone, no figures mentioned, just a seemingly harmless question. But Daniel looked at me for a long time before answering. He didn't give advice right away. Instead, he asked, "Have you realized they're not just borrowing your money, but also your silence and your skills?" I froze. Have they ever supported you the way you've supported them? I didn't answer. For a brief moment, the entire room felt still, as if only he and I existed, and in Daniel's eyes, there was no judgment, only a directness that couldn't be dodged. For the first time in years, I left a seminar not with a new investment plan, but with a quiet question lodged in my chest. What if I wasn't truly a member of the family, but merely the provider of free services? And if that's true, how much longer do I intend to play that role? I wanted to believe that things would fall back into place, that this Christmas would be different, gentler, more sincere, because I had good news to share. Daniel and I officially started dating after a few casual weekend lunches discussing finance, a topic we were both passionate about and could talk about endlessly without even needing to eat. There was no love at first sight, no romantic confession, just after-work coffees, email exchanges about financial problems in families, and then one day he said, "I don't think you're just good at finance. You're good at seeing through people." And I smiled, because it had been so long since anyone said something like that about me. When Daniel proposed, I didn't rush to tell anyone. I wanted to wait until Christmas. I wanted to give my parents, Ethan and Sophie, a beautiful surprise, a bonding moment, like what I once believed family could be. So I began preparing. Even amidst the chaos of year-end reports, I spent every evening picking out gifts, not generic ones, but carefully chosen presents. A rare leather-bound book set for Mom, the exact kind she mentioned back in March. A premium tool set for Dad, the kind he'd never buy because it's too extravagant. A digital drawing pad for Ethan, hoping it would help him focus more on his art. And an online business management course for Sophie, something she once said she needed more skills to start over. I didn't tell anyone about the engagement. I planned everything in secret. I would announce it on the morning of the 24th, after the presents were opened, when everyone was in high spirits. I even imagined the scene. Ethan teasing me for finally getting a boyfriend, Mom crying tears of joy as she hugged me, and Dad giving Daniel a terse but affirming handshake. That was my vision. A gift to myself after a long, grueling year filled with spreadsheets and unkept promises. Christmas was when families came together. I had believed that. And this year, I wanted to believe one more time. I still remember the giddy feeling as I wrapped each gift in metallic red paper, tying every ribbon by hand, as if each small gesture might preserve something intact within this family. But then, the mismatched details began to appear, gently, vaguely, like a mist settling over the picture I had tried to repaint for years. First, my mother, Sadie, who had always loved preparing everything just right for Christmas, suddenly declined my offer to help. "I'm busy with church work," she texted curtly. No invitation to come early and decorate, no grocery list, no mention of the embroidered tablecloth I'd once brought back from Florence for special occasions. I told myself maybe she really was busy. But then Ethan, when I asked about his Christmas plans, he muttered something about working on a major painting and wasn't sure if he'd be around all the days. Sophie dodged too, saying she was considering a new business project and didn't know her schedule yet. It struck me as odd. Every year, no matter how hectic, we always discussed the menu, the timing, who would bring what. But this year, everything was vague, as if I were the only one left without a script. One afternoon, dropping by my parents' place to deliver a gift I'd already wrapped, I saw my father, James, hurriedly closing the garage. For a fleeting moment, I caught sight of a large suitcase and a model of a coastal house sitting on the floor. When I asked, he said it was for a construction project, then quickly changed the subject. But inside the living room, on the table, was a stack of architecture magazines, and right underneath, a pile of real estate documents. the kind I knew so well that a single glance told me someone was listed as a buyer. I said nothing, just nodded, smiled, and left. But in my heart, a nameless feeling began to stir, as if I were standing outside a half-closed door. Only this time, the door wasn't meant for me to enter. I told Daniel about the suitcase in the garage, the model of the seaside house, and my mother's uncharacteristic silence. He didn't jump to conclusions, just furrowed his brow and asked, "Do you think they're hiding something from you?" I shook my head immediately. Impossible. It's Christmas. My family would never do that. I said it like a statement, but even I wasn't sure who I was speaking to Daniel, or to the wounded part of myself still scrambling for a reason not to break. I was used to being forgotten, taken for granted, but being excluded, that was unthinkable. And then, as if to dispel all doubts, my mother sent a group text the next evening. This year, we'll celebrate Christmas early on the 23rd. Dinner at 6 p.m., church service at 9 p.m., gifts on the morning of the 24th. Due to changes in the year-end church schedule, I can't arrange it on the actual day. I read the message at least 3 times. Every detail made sense. Too much sense. Like a schedule written so perfectly no one could question it. I tapped received and told myself I'd been overthinking. Must be the work stress. Must be how I've grown used to expecting the worst when someone doesn't reply. In any case, there was still the evening of the 23rd and the morning of the 24th. I would bring the gifts, cook Dad's favorite roast, announce the engagement. And everything would be fine. I even folded the red dress Daniel picked for me on my birthday and placed it beside the ring box I planned to carry with me. On the evening of December 23rd, Daniel and I drove from Boston to Concord. The road I knew so well now seemed longer, as if every tree, every curve quietly watched me, asking a question I wasn't ready to answer. When we arrived, the house still shimmered with lights as always, strings of bulbs on the roof, a wreath hung at the living room window, and the faint scent of cinnamon cookies wafting from the kitchen. Everything looked the same, and yet nothing felt familiar. My mother opened the door with her usual smile, but her eyes skimmed over Daniel like an unexpected guest, not a future son-in-law. Ethan sat on the sofa, headphones on, nodding to music. He didn't even stand to greet us. Sophie was on her phone, texting, and muttered, "Oh, you're here?" No one asked about the drive. No one looked at the large gift bag I was carrying. I stepped into the kitchen where I'd cooked for years, but this time, no one asked for help. Mom had prepared a simple dinner: roast chicken, pumpkin cream soup, salad, and a crusty loaf of bread. No Dad's favorite roast. No special red wine I had ordered for the occasion. No hands needed mine. I sat at the table feeling like a late guest, informed of the time, the place, but clearly not expected. During dinner, I tried to make conversation, asked Ethan about his new painting, Sophie about her business ideas, but got only brief, fragmented replies. Even my father, who usually loved debating markets and investments, said a few words then focused on his phone. Daniel placed his hand gently on my thigh under the table, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. But right then, I knew. Something was being hidden, and everyone here was in on it. After dinner, as everyone quietly cleaned up and seemed to just be waiting for time to pass, I walked into the living room and sat beside the small tree set up in the corner. My mother used to call it the backup tree, only used when there wasn't enough time to decorate properly. I reached into my bag to check end-of-year transfers for my clients when I noticed Sophie's phone left on the coffee table. The screen was still lit, the message clearly visible. I hadn't meant to look, but my eyes couldn't unsee it. It's signed. The house will be ready by the 24th, in time to decorate and host the main night. Below was a photo. A wooden sign reading, "Seaside Home, a New Beginning," hung in front of a cream-colored house, the misty coastline in the distance. The message was from someone named Carol, a real estate agent my mother had mentioned back in October. I scrolled up one more line. Ethan has picked a spot for his easel. Sophie said she'll try filming a gift opening reel in the living room. No Olivia, so it'll be easier to arrange. In that moment, I felt myself falling, not a loud, violent drop, but a quiet, weightless descent. The room around me was no longer a familiar living room. It was a staged set, and I was a background actor invited to fill a role, only to be written out before the real show began. I picked up Sophie's phone, placed it gently back on the table, so softly no one noticed. Then I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, where everyone was making small talk. About the failed cookies, about the light snow this year. I looked at each of them. No one looked back at me. We left my parents' house just before 11 p.m. On the way back to the hotel, I sat silently in the car, clutching the small gift bag that held the ring box, the gift I had hoped would turn Christmas morning into something sacred. Daniel drove without speaking for the first 10 minutes. He knew I needed time, but then, as we stopped at a red light on Main Street, the bakeries closed, the last decorative lights twinkling on the snow, he spoke, gently but firmly. You should confront them. Tomorrow morning. Before they shut you out of something else. I looked at him, nodded, then shook my head. Number not yet. He didn't push, just asked, why? It took me a while to find the words. Because if I say it now, then everything will collapse. I want to hold on to something. One Christmas morning that isn't bitter. One last chance for them to see me. Not as the one who gives money. Not as the one who fixes things. But as someone starting a new chapter. I want them to see that, even just once. Daniel sighed and turned his gaze back to the road. Green light. The car moved forward. No one said another word. But inside me, there was a very quiet whisper. The last time. The last time I let myself hope. The last time I believed that being kind enough, patient enough, would make my family turn around and choose to love me the right way. On the morning of December 24th, light snow fell, covering the walkway in front of the house with a thin, white layer. Daniel and I returned, bringing cinnamon waffles, a thermos of hot apple cider, and the gift boxes I had prepared nearly a month ago. The atmosphere inside the house seemed very normal at first glance, too normal. My mother wore a snowflake-patterned sweater and was making tea in the kitchen. My father sat at the dining table, reading the paper, coughing quietly now and then. Ethan still had his headphones on. Sophie clutched her phone, and no one asked if we had slept well or mentioned last night's dinner. I placed each gift under the tree myself. Still the same small tree from the day before, sparsely decorated with a few worn baubles and flickering lights. There was no Christmas music, no laughter, only the creaking of wood beneath my steps. I handed each present to each person, keeping a smile as if everything was fine. For my mother, the leather-bound book set she had long wished for my father, the high-end German engineering tool set, for Ethan, the newest digital drawing pad, for Sophie, an online business management course along with a handwritten card. They opened their gifts, said thank you, but no one looked me in the eye. Sophie set the card down without reading it. Ethan nodded and called the tablet an expensive thing, as if its worth was only in its price tag. Mom forced a smile, saying, "Oh, you remembered this?" Dad simply said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then came my turn to open my gifts. A cheap notebook, a pack of generic ballpoint pens, and a $20 bookstore gift card. Not a single item showed any sign of being prepared for me. Not for me, Olivia, the daughter who remembered every one of their preferences. Just someone who should have something for the sake of it. I looked at Daniel, and he gave a small nod, as if he had seen it coming, but I still smiled. I still kept the ring in my bag. When everyone began gathering wrapping paper to clean up, I stood up. I have something to say. All eyes turned to me. I took out the small ring box and opened the lid. Daniel and I are engaged. Silence stretched for 5 seconds, long enough to count my own heartbeat. Then, my mother gave a soft chuckle. Oh, really? When? No one asked about the ring. No one asked about wedding plans. Sophie shrugged. Congrats. Then went back to her phone. Ethan said nothing, just put his headphones back on. My father looked at me and nodded, a gesture I once believed was enough, but today it wasn't. I stood there, the ring glinting on my hand, in a room I once believed was the warmest place in the world, and realized, to them, my good news was nothing more than a brief interruption in a weather report. No one here truly cared. Not because they were busy, but because they had chosen not to care about me anymore. After breakfast, as everyone drifted into their own rooms or buried their faces in their phones, I wandered through the house out of old habit, trying to find something familiar to hold on to. Mom was watering her orchids in the kitchen. Dad had the TV on but wasn't really watching. And Daniel had gone out to the car to get his jacket. I walked into the living room, tidying up the wrapping paper as I did every year, when I noticed Sophie's phone had fallen under the sofa. The screen lit up, once again. I knew I shouldn't, but my hand reached for it anyway, like a reflex, as if my heart already knew the truth was right here. A message from Carol's account appeared clearly. Congratulations! The transfer has been completed this morning. Bank confirms receipt from Ethan Mitchell, secondary account holder. I opened the attached image. A $12,000 transfer receipt from Ethan's account. Recipient: Carol Holdings. Purpose: purchase of seaside vacation home. Below was a message from Sophie. She doesn't know. Don't mention Olivia, okay? I stood frozen. The phone trembled in my hands. I scrolled up, found an earlier exchange between Sophie and Mom, dated a few weeks ago. I think hosting the real Christmas at the new house makes the most sense. Olivia's so busy, and now there's Daniel. She's not really family in the true sense anymore. And my mother had replied, yes, let her focus on her own life. I didn't know how long I stood there, but when Daniel returned and called my name, I snapped back, folded the phone shut, and placed it back on the table. Not roughly, not hurriedly, as if by keeping my exterior calm, everything might not fall apart all at once. But inside, I knew. They had used the very money I lent them. $12,000 Ethan claimed was for art materials. $15,000 Sophie said was for a promising startup, to buy a seaside vacation home together, a house I had never heard of, a real Christmas gathering I had never been invited to. And me? I was just someone kept on the sidelines. Close enough to be used. Far enough to be left out. I didn't get angry. Didn't slam the table, didn't yell, didn't break anything. I just placed my hand on Daniel's shoulder and whispered, I need to talk to them. Right now. He nodded, then stepped out onto the porch. I turned back to the living room where Mom was wiping the windowsill, Dad pouring coffee, Ethan leaning against the doorway, and Sophie still glued to her phone. I want to ask something, I began, my voice soft as if I were asking about the missing salt in yesterday's soup. That seaside house. It's where the real Christmas is happening, isn't it? 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. No one was shocked, just a brief pause, as if they hadn't expected me to find out so soon. Sophie spoke first. It's not what you think. I looked straight into her eyes. Then, what is it? Ethan gave a weak chuckle, tilting his head back. We just thought, you're busy. You have Daniel, your job, your own world. We didn't want to bother you. I turned to my parents. And what about you? Mom? You texted, let her focus on her own life. What did that mean? My mother set down the cloth, her eyes shimmering. I didn't mean anything bad. I just thought maybe this year a little change might be better for everyone. Better, I repeated, almost to myself. So you used the money I lent to buy a new house, to host a real Christmas, without me. No one denied it. No one apologized. Just a string of excuses that sounded like static from a broken radio. No one meant to exclude you. It's just that you're busy. Daniel isn't really family, so… And then my mother, as if to wrap it all up, said, "You're being too sensitive. Don't turn this into a problem." I pressed my lips together, nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood. They weren't sorry. They didn't hide it because they knew it was wrong. They hid it because they didn't want to be inconvenienced by my feelings. And that was the most heartbreaking thing of all. I said nothing more. No arguing, no reasoning, no more evidence. I simply walked toward the little tree in the corner of the room, bent down, gathered the gifts I had brought, the books for Mom, tools for Dad, the drawing pad for Ethan, the course for Sophie, and placed them all on the floor, right beneath the wool rug my mother had woven when I was 8. Everyone watched, but no one stopped me. My father cleared his throat. My mother wiped silent tears. Sophie turned away. Ethan crossed his arms and leaned against the wall like someone uninvolved. I walked to the door, opened the closet, grabbed my coat, slipped on my shoes, and turned back one last time. This house, where I had once hung red ornaments on the tree, written Christmas cards late into the night, napped on the sofa after cooking all day, was now just a house, nothing more. I no longer saw memories here, only roles being repeated, in a play where I no longer held a leading part. Daniel was waiting by the car. When I got in, he held my hand without a word. I leaned my head against the window, watching the house fade into the mist. Inside, they were probably packing to go decorate the seaside home, the one I wasn't invited to. In my mind, a scene played, Ethan setting up his easel facing the ocean, Sophie live-streaming in a polished living room, Mom snapping photos of a giant Christmas tree, Dad sipping coffee on the porch, all of them smiling, busy, and not thinking of me. I opened my phone, not to message them, but to scroll through all the transfers I had made this year. $12,000 to Ethan, $15,000 to Sophie, plus countless others. The numbers ran on, like a statement of kindness being drained. I wondered how much of what I called family was just a duty I carried. How many hugs, how many thank yous were just ways to maintain a familiar source of funds. And if today I could no longer pay, would I still be part of whatever this family is supposed to be? I didn't cry. There were no more tears left to shield a hurt like this. I just exhaled, long and deep, then looked at Daniel and whispered, "Let's go." He nodded. The car pulled away, and for the first time, I didn't look back. 2 days after Christmas, I sat alone in Daniel's apartment in Boston, beside a small tree decorated with a few silver-white baubles. The room was quiet, no chatter or laughter, but I felt lighter than I had during any Christmas in years. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and launched a blank Excel spreadsheet. For the first time in my life, I wasn't working for a client. I was calculating for myself. I typed in each transaction, month by month, year by year. $3,500 for Ethan to buy premium French paints, $8,000 for an exhibition that might get critical attention, $15,000 for Sophie to open a mobile cafe that shut down in 3 months, $6,000 for a business course she never finished. I checked emails, messages, transaction history. Some lines were explicit. "Sis, I'll pay you back next month." Some were just, "Urgent, please help me this one time." I made notes of every piece of usable evidence. After nearly 4 hours, I looked at the summary on screen. $107,300. Of that, $75,000 could be proven through transfers, emails, or messages. The rest was cash, times I handed it over at home or sent it through Mom's account to be passed on later. My stomach tightened. With that money, I could have paid off 60% of a first home, could have invested earlier, could have traveled the world, could have lived a life of my choosing, not the one others assigned to me because I was the most stable one in the family. I called Daniel and asked if he knew a good lawyer for personal loan disputes. He wasn't surprised. Charlotte Hayes, an old friend. You'll like her. Direct. No room for ambiguity. I met Charlotte the following afternoon at her small office in Cambridge. No glossy wooden desk, no framed legal prints behind her. Just a white desk, 2 blue fabric chairs, and a short-haired lawyer with sharp eyes. I told my story. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she asked just one question. Do you want to recover the money or just end this? I answered without hesitation. Both. Charlotte gave a small smile. Then we'll start with the loan list. The ones with proof. We'll send a formal repayment request, 90-day deadline. As for the cash, you'll have to accept it as tuition for not repeating this. I nodded. No regret. Because I knew money can be lost, time won't return. But there's one thing I will no longer allow myself to lose. My self-respect. At the beginning of January, I sent an email to each member of my family, Ethan, Sophie, Mom, and Dad. In it, I attached a detailed list of loans with proof, dates, amounts, transfer descriptions, along with messages confirming repayment promises. I wrote concisely, without insult or sarcasm. I request the repayment of these loans within 90 days from today. If there is no formal response by then, my attorney, Ms. Charlotte Hayes, will proceed with legal action. After sending it, I closed the laptop. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was only a strange sensation, as if I had just signed a contract with myself never to return to that old role again. 2 days later, Ethan called. You're actually doing this? I replied. Yes. You're ruining our sibling bond over $400 for paint? I said calmly. You once called it art. Now I call it a debt. Ethan shouted something. I don't remember exactly, only that he hung up before I could say goodbye. That evening, Mom called, crying. You've changed. You're not my Olivia anymore. I listened as she talked about Sunday dinners, camping trips, about family doesn't keep tabs on each other. But when I mentioned the message, don't mention Olivia, okay? She fell silent, and I said, for the first time without trembling, Mom, no one in this family ever asked what I needed. They only asked how much I could help. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. 3 days later, Sophie texted curtly, You're cruel. As for my father, always quiet, he sent a single line. If you can live in peace with this decision, then go ahead. And yes, I had begun to live in peace. Not because I had won, but because I stopped in time, before I melted entirely into the role others wanted from me. I was no longer the family's financial manager, no longer the dutiful daughter, no longer the safety net beneath everyone's failures. I was Olivia, a 30-year-old woman who knows how to tally, not just money, but trust. Mom invited me to dinner in early March, under the pretense of a family gathering to clear up misunderstandings. I knew what awaited me there. But I still went, not out of hope, but because I wanted them to see a new Olivia. Not evasive, not guilt-ridden, no longer the mediator in a rigged game. Daniel drove me to Concord, but stopped at the gate. I walked in alone. Mom greeted me with a half-hearted hug. Dad shook my hand instead of embracing me like before. Ethan and Sophie were already seated, their expressions tight like drawn strings. Dinner began in silence. No one touched the food. Mom spoke first. We're a family. What happened was just a misunderstanding. You didn't have to bring a lawyer into this. I looked at her without speaking. Sophie chimed in. You always act like you're right. But you have no idea how hard it is to run a business." Ethan leaned back, his tone flat but laced with blame. "You always say you're helping, but really it's to make people owe you. To be the good one, the successful one. And now you're collecting like it's ledger work." I lifted my head. "No one forced you to borrow. Every time I gave, I believed your promise to repay. No one made you write those words." My father set down his fork, voice low. "You're tearing everything apart. You chose to hurt your family over a bit of money instead of understanding that, sometimes, family isn't measured in dollars." I pressed my lips together and took out a printed document, the list of loans, with clear deadlines. "I came here to repeat what I wrote in the email. 3 months. If not repaid, Charlotte will proceed." My mother cried, whispering, "You're doing this just because you weren't invited to Ethan's house? Over a Christmas dinner, you're suing your own family?" I looked at her for a long time. Not because of dinner, but because for the first time, I knew what it felt like to be excluded from a family I had always tried to hold together. I stood, grabbed my coat. Ethan called after me. "You really want to split things this cleanly? Fine, but don't expect anyone to take your side later." I turned back, voice strangely calm. "You're right. But at least this time, I'm on my own side." I left that house not in bitterness, but in clarity. I didn't come to win. I came to close a role. I used to think that once things were made clear, once boundaries were set, everything would end. But I forgot. Those who used to control you through silence don't give up when you find your voice. They just change tactics. No more texts of apology or tearful calls. Instead, they turned to people around me. 2 days later, relatives started calling, asking, "What happened that you'd sue your own family?" Then adding, "Anyway, outsiders will never understand family matters." On Facebook, Mom reposted last year's Christmas photo. The whole family around the tree, me off to the far right, noticeably apart. The caption read, "When you become more successful, do you start distancing from your own family?" No one named me, but everyone understood. Ethan posted a painting of an empty house, outside a woman turning away. Beneath it, he wrote, "It's not the poor artist who needs money, it's the family that needs forgiveness." Sophie sniped in her story, "Money can't buy love, but apparently it buys fake pain." I read it all, once, then turned off my phone. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't explain, didn't post my side to set the record straight, because I understood, if you need social media to prove you're a daughter, a sister, a good person, that battle was flawed from the start. I met with Charlotte to update her. She skimmed through the public posts and said coolly, "This is what we call a desperation burst. When they can't manipulate you with guilt or duty, they use public opinion. They want you to feel bad, to return to your old role. But if you stay steady, they'll have to change, not because they want to, but because they'll have no other choice." I sat in silence for a long time. I no longer felt anger, only something very deep, like clarity after a long delirium. Maybe I had lost the version of family I once tried to preserve, but in return, I was slowly finding someone I had long lost. Myself. The 3-month deadline passed slowly. No one responded directly, but I knew they had read the emails, received the letters, and were holding on to silence as a final form of resistance. I stayed silent too. No chasing, no reminders. But I kept living. I moved out of my rental, stayed temporarily with Daniel as we searched for a place that truly felt like home. We started cooking dinner every night, sharing a marriage budget, and talking about things we'd never dared to before. Buying a home together, having children, living a life not for others. Then one day in early April, Ethan sent an email. No apology. Just, "I've sold the vacation home. Transferred $30,000 to your account. We're even." Attached was a bank receipt. A week later, Sophie texted, transferred $25,000, sold my car, bought an old Toyota. Happy now? I didn't reply, but I saved everything. Near the end of the month, my parents announced they'd moved into a smaller apartment, selling most of their furniture to save for old age. I recovered the full $75,000, the amount with legal proof. The rest, I didn't pursue. Not because I forgot, but because I knew what I truly wanted back wasn't the money. It was the right to live my life, free of guilt, debt, or roles others cast me into. When I looked at my bank account, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something very still, like the air after a storm. Trees down, tiles broken, but the ground remains, ready to rebuild. Daniel and I used our savings and that money to buy a 3-bedroom apartment in Boston, with a balcony facing the park and morning sunlight flooding the kitchen. At our first Thanksgiving in the new home, I baked cinnamon bread, opened a bottle of red wine, and welcomed Daniel's family, his mom, his sister, and a 6-year-old niece, for dinner. No one asked about the past. No one expected a loan, only warmth, freely given. I stood in the kitchen, stirring soup, feeling no more emptiness. Not because I had a perfect family now, but because, for the first time, I didn't need to prove anything to be seen as belonging. Have you ever been assigned a role in your family to the point you forgot who you really are? Have you ever wondered if you were no longer useful, would they still want you? Some families don't need to scream to hurt you. They only need to stay silent when you need them most. And sometimes, resistance isn't arguing back. It's saying, I won't do this anymore. If Olivia's story touched something in you, share your story in the comments below. Because someone out there might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. If you see yourself in this journey, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone you believe deserves to be loved the right way. Because sometimes, family isn't where you're born. It's where you're heard, respected, and never taken for granted.